So we have these sessions every Saturday, and we love to help aspiring product managers and also the people who are already into product management, helping them with upskilling themselves and just learning a lot of new things. So these sessions are completely free for everyone. Anyone can join in, and we make it a habit to invite our product leaders, uh, that we have. So we are very happy to have all of you here. And on top of it, Anurag, it's a tremendous pleasure to have you here first. So leading so many big teams. So just giving a brief introduction about him, directly sliding into that. So he's currently the director of product management at Make My Trip. He has led teams at Hotstar, in Mobi, and he has done a lot of things. I can keep talking about it. But yeah, Anurag, if there is something that you would like to, start with sharing, please do. Before that, just one quick note. Um, Everyone who has joined us today, we believe that since we are trying to bring together a lot of knowledge, and we would want you to share it as well. So whatever you learn, do keep taking out notes. Taking out notes. It's a very good way to, keep learning. And if you do, we are also happy to reward you with a small book or getting an interview with our product mentors as well. So we do encourage all of you just sharing all the knowledge that you have learned from these sessions. I'll put the details in the comments, and I'll quickly hand over to Anurag for the session.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
and welcome everyone. Thank you for the fantastic turnout. I was not expecting this so on a Saturday evening, but thank you so much for everyone who has joined. And yeah, we happy to get started. So already, I would skip over my introduction because thank you so much, Sakshi, for giving that fantastic introduction. I'll just quickly sort of skip over to the actual content without wasting more time. So let's quickly get started. I'll just, as is customary, I'll share my screen and ask you guys if you can see it. I hope you can. Is my screen visible?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So like we already sort of discussed that the topic for today is innovation and ideation techniques for PMs. It's a topic that is very close to my heart because uh, what I've realized over a period of time is that coming up with great ideas, right? And in different settings, right? Be it in an interview setting, right? Or be it in a setting where your product has been in existence for, let's say, 20 plus years, right? And all the low hanging fruits are gone, right? It becomes harder and harder to come up with good and high quality ideas, right? That will deliver the next level of growth or the next level of revenue or the next level of whatever metric you are looking to move, right? So that is why this topic is pretty close to my heart, and this is what I chose for the talk for today. And hopefully you'll find good value in the next whatever 1 hour we are going to spend here, right? So I'm going to personally talk about techniques that I have kind of refined over a period of time, right? And and it has served me well both in an interview setting as well as in a professional setting. So think of this sort of masterclass, so-called masterclass, as something that can help you in cracking product interviews and also help you in generating good quality ideas that you can present to your different stakeholders, be it your senior leadership, revenue guys, business guys, right? Marketing guys, right? All these all these stakeholders that you have in your system, you can pretty much uh, use some of these techniques to present some good ideas and then collaborate with them and hopefully bring them to the world and hopefully see some impact, right? So let's quickly get started. We'll skip over my background slides already covered, but basically what I want to talk about is I do share a lot of content on the social channels, specifically on LinkedIn. And I've seen a lot of good feedback coming through from a lot of my connections, first order connections, or even people who have like looked at my content then later on connected with me. So feel free to connect with me over LinkedIn. I'll put that link in the chat box at the end of the talk. So quickly getting started, right? So first I want to touch upon the definition of product management itself, right? Because I will derive uh, the ideas, right? Or the techniques for deriving those ideas from this definition itself, right? So let's first quickly talk about what really is product management, right? And there are a lot of different sort of definitions of product management floating around, but one definition that I really love is something that I came across actually fairly recently, like 2 years back, right? This is from ex product head of Netflix called Gibson Biddle, and it is called the DHM model of product management. Basically, what makes your product delight your customers. So what kind of things that you will do that will delight your customers, make it hard to copy, which is the H, and then basically enhance the margin of your products, right? So eventually at some point of time, your product becomes profitable, becomes sustainable, becomes scalable, right? So DHM, right? D for delighting customers, which is the core principle of product management, right? H, over a period of time, you want to make your product hard to copy, and then eventually at some point of time you want to become profitable, right? Maybe early on in the sort of product journey, the products may not be profitable, you might have to invest in growth strategies, but eventually you want to become a sustainable company, right? So I like this definition of product management a lot. Do look up Gibson Biddle on internet. I think his talks are wonderful, his content is wonderful. You should definitely go ahead and check him out, right? Having said that, what happens? And I'll take today, what will happen is I will take a lot of examples from Make My Trip because A, consumer internet is fairly easy to relate to. B, a lot of you would have already booked through Make My Trip. It is the dominant online travel brand in the country, right? So most of you, I believe, have already experienced Make My Trip, right? So I'll give you a lot of Make My Trip examples, which will kind of serve as a constant thread within the talk, right? And eventually at the end, we'll do some generic examples as well, which will basically be some product questions, uh, hard level product questions where you're looking to come up with good high quality ideas, right? That is the topic for today, right? So, so practically, what does that DHM model mean, right? So let's say I'm part of the product team at Make My Trip, right? And these are the kind of questions that I come across, right? So, for example, one of the key questions you are always looking at is what is a new sort of BU that Make My Trip can launch, right? What is a new product line that Make My Trip can launch that will potentially, let's say, add? So, Make My Trip typically does $6 billion of GMV in a year, right? So, if I want to add 10% of additional growth on top of that, let's say I want to add 500 to $600 million on top of that, how do what do I launch, right? So if your CEO is asking you that question, what do I launch that will sort of delight the customer will adopt it and eventually add 10% to your top line, what will your answer be, right? That is a practical question that you kind of struggle with as a PM, right? Or another question that could be there is, for example, for any e-commerce company, including Make My Trip, one of the core sort of metrics for us is basically conversions for a booking process, or what we call as funnels, right? So, so how do you improve the conversion? How do you keep improving the conversion of your funnels, right? So imagine our flights product, right? You come in, you basically search for a certain sector and you're trying to book a flight. You're already sitting at a fairly high conversion rate because the product has been optimized for the last 20 years. And yet the business leaders, the CEO, the CXOs of the company are coming to you and asking you to improve the conversion further by 100 basis points, which is absolute 1%, right? So let's say you're sitting at 10%, the company wants you to improve it to 11%. What do? Right? You're already at a fairly high sort of number, right? Already at a fairly high baseline. And the third bit is, how do you help enhance margins as a product manager, right? What can you do that can help enhance the margins, hopefully improve the profitability of the company? These are practical problems that you will grapple with in your day jobs, right? Uh, and feel free to stop me if anything is not clear or the questions are not clear, right? But this is something that you will struggle with every single day on your job, right? So I want to take up some few practical examples that you can relate to. And what happens is when you face these problems, right? So for example, the CEO is asking you, give me some fresh ideas, what can we launch? A completely new thing, right? And you're struggling to sort of understand, like, there are just so many different options, right? There can be two things, right? Either you are saying that I don't see any good sort of feasible option where else we can go, right? As make my trip as a company, right? For example, if you already look at our apps or our website, we already do flight bookings, hotel bookings, we do ground transport, train bookings, bus bookings, we do holidays, we do airport cabs, we do forex, we do visa. And you might feel that, hey, you know what, we are already doing so much, what else we could do, right? And that additional option also needs to generate 10% of the top line, right? Incremental 10% on your top line, right? So either you might struggle with, I don't know what to do, right? we already have all the options that could potentially be there on the platform. I'm really not able to come up with some good idea that can really give that extra 10%, right? Or it could be the other way around. You might be getting some ideas, but then you're struggling whether that's a good fit, right? That is worth communicating to the CEO, right? So you might be getting some ideas, right? So maybe you're thinking of just making it up right now. So maybe you're thinking of medical tourism, right? And you're wondering whether that's a good fit for for your company, right? Whether someone like MakeMyTrip should invest in something like medical tourism, right? So how do you even, like, in your mind, how do you clear your mind that whether this idea is worth investing in or not, right? Whether the CEO will feel that it is way too away from the current MakeMyTrip charter, or does it really make sense, right? So how do you do it? And firstly, why do you, there are three very specific reasons why people find these questions very, very challenging, right? The first thing is when the questions were posed to you, right? When you look at the questions, right? What new business unit MakeMyTrip can launch that will add $500, $600 million is a completely inside out question, right? You are asking the question from MakeMyTrip's perspective, right? But product management, like we discussed, the DHM model, right? It is from the user's perspective, right? It is from the customer's perspective. But the questions that come to you from your leadership or from your company are from the company's point of view. It is never from the user's point of view, right? So that becomes very, very challenging. How do you take your internal sort of goals, targets, and map it to the customer's point of view, right? The second big problem is most of the easy things are already done, right? What I call as low hanging fruits. Most of the easy stuff is done, right? So let's say you are the product manager for the flights business in MakeMyTrip, right? And I'm specifically talking about the domestic flights business, which is basically within India. That product has been sharpened over the last 20 years, and still you need to come up with a roadmap. You need to come up with fresh ideas every quarter, right? So what do you do that can really drive impact, right? The law of diminishing returns is already settling in, right? And the third thing is coming up with a list of ideas itself becomes very, very hard, right? How do you, like, creativity is thought of as a natural process, right? But there has to be some source of creativity, right? How do you even bring your creativity? That's the funny bit, right? You have to bring in creativity, and yet you have to bring in creativity in a structured manner, right? So structured manner and creativity is supposed to be like a polar opposite to each other, right? You're supposed to bring in creativity, yet you have to come to the answer in a very structured manner, right? And you think of artists, you think of entertainers as creative people, right? And you don't know if there is a structure or a process to it, right? So how do you do creativity in product management in a formal, in a structured manner so that it feels like a process and not something that you're pulling out of thin air is a big, big problem, right? Any questions, doubts, please feel free to stop me, right? Anything that is not clear. So today we are going to talk about how you are going to supercharge your thinking. How do you sort of solve for some of these obstacles that you will face as a product manager on a daily basis? And how do you become legendary, right? And I love Kung Fu Panda, so no other reason to sort of put him out there, right? So let's talk about the four pillars. These are four pillars that I personally use. This is something that is very personal to me. I have used this successfully in a lot of different varieties and a lot of different settings. And over a period of time, I've figured out that these things actually work. So we are going to talk about those four pillars that will sort of solve the three problems that we talked about, right? How do you map companies' goals to customers' goals? How do you sort of, when the low hanging fruits are already done, when the easy stuff is already done, how do you keep coming up with new ideas? And third thing, how do you bring in the creativity in a structured manner? So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is basically what I call as abstraction, right? So what happens, like, let's say you are talking, let's say we are discussing, right? Or you are in an interview setting, right? And you are asked a question, right? So let's say how will you, uh, I'm going to give you a non MakeMyTrip example right now, just to make it more clear. So let's say if I ask you a question, how will you improve WhatsApp, right? And I asked you this in a product interview. 99% of the people will come and tell me that, you know what, maybe the notifications could be structured slightly better. I want to see higher priority notifications from my first order connects. Or they will talk about some other thing that maybe you can do something in the side drawer, right? Or maybe you can rank the messages a little better, right? They will talk about very sort of incremental stuff, right? People struggle to come up with good ideas when you give them a very popular product like WhatsApp, right? Because in their minds, WhatsApp is already a great product. WhatsApp is already a fantastic product that they use on a daily basis, right? And then for them, it becomes very, very hard because they don't even think about it is so convenient to them that they don't even think about how something like WhatsApp, no one goes about thinking how could they improve WhatsApp uh, significantly, right? And eventually, what happens is when you get a question like this in a product interview, right? Or maybe you're truly a product manager at WhatsApp, right? At, let's say, Facebook, right? Actually, I have a few friends of mine who are actually working on WhatsApp right now. That's kind of funny, right? So let's say you are actually a PM for WhatsApp at Facebook, right? How would you come up with a roadmap? It is such a hard thing to do for a product which has been designed so well, has simplicity at the core of its design. How will you even do it, right? So the first thing to do in these cases, the first technique that works really, really well is basically get away from thinking of WhatsApp as a messaging product, right? Which is the core use case that it solves, right? And just think about the mission, right? What is it that WhatsApp truly is doing, right? So we'll come to the WhatsApp example at a later bit, but let's switch gears. And so in WhatsApp case, just to sort of give you a teaser, when people are communicating with each other, what you are actually doing is you are connecting people, right? So if you re-articulate WhatsApp's mission to say that, you know what, WhatsApp is not just a communication product, right? WhatsApp is a product that actually helps connect people. You will get a lot more fresher ideas, right? And I'll come to that in a bit. The later half of that is actually uh, dedicated to this question only. How do you improve WhatsApp? But basically, you don't think about the use cases. You think about the mission. And mission in this case, in WhatsApp case, is connecting people, right? It's not just people communicating to each other. You effectively doing communication, right? That is how they went from chat to video calls, right? To audio calls, right? And then what else you could do to connect people, something that we can talk about, right? But for now, because I'm going to sort of carry one example in different contexts, right? So that you can see the same example in a lot of different settings so that the concepts become absolutely clear to you. I will stick to one example, which is make my trip, right? So let's say same question, right? CEO comes to you and asks you what new business unit Make My Trip can launch, right? Now today you think of Make My Trip as a ticketing platform, right? That I come and I book travel tickets, right? And you think of Make My Trip, okay, it's a ticketing platform. So maybe you add another line of business or another business unit or another offering where you can add more ticketing use cases, right? But what if I tell you that instead of thinking of Make My Trip as a ticketing platform, think of Make My Trip as a platform to make travel delightful, right? How do you make travel very, very delightful for the users, right? That's the first principle, right? The DHM principle, the first principle, right? So don't think of Make My Trip just as a ticketing platform. Think of Make My Trip as a platform that solves all travel use cases for its customer, right? So you're kind of abstracting the mission, you are going one level above, right? And you're making travel truly, truly delightful for the customers, right? If you articulate it this way, the kind of ideas that can come to your mind are this, right? For example, one of the ideas would be there are different stages of a travel customer, right? One of the travel stages is planning, right? How do you plan travel, right? And not everyone likes to do travel bookings on his own, right? There is a significant chunk of customers, premium and affluent customers, who want travel planning to be outsourced to someone. So maybe Make My Trip can launch a concierge, right? A concierge basically some relationship agent or a planner, right? Who basically helps the customer book plan travel, right? In plan and then book travel, right? So travel concierge can be one big offering that Make My Trip can potentially launch. Right? It can be a new sort of business unit, right? It's a assisted assisted selling model, right? That will cater to a significant chunk of customers who are premium and affluent customers who are willing to pay maybe a subscription fees, right, or service charge on top of the travel tickets to basically book their tickets, right? How did you get this idea? You got this idea by abstracting away, by saying that how do I make travel delightful, not just ticketing, that people will come and book tickets on their own, right? Other example could be, if when people travel through airports, people do international travel, right? They pass through duty-free areas, right? When they pass through duty-free areas, they shop, right? And that is core to the travel experience, especially on international travel, right? So how can Make My Trip help offer a product that can give them a great duty, that can help drive discovery of all the outlets that are there in a large airport, right? So for example, the Singapore airport, it's a huge airport, right? How do I even know what are the different outlets that are out there? What are the different kinds of merchandise and products that can buy at Changi airport, right? Maybe gifts I want to carry for my family, right? Or for my relatives, right? So can Make My Trip build a product that can offer a great duty-free shopping experience to its international flights, right? Of example, if you think of more sort of travel, right, in a delightful manner, just think like how can you delight customers by not even physically transporting them to their destinations, right? Maybe offer a virtual travel experience by offering virtual activities, right? So offer, let's say, 360-degree videos, beautiful 360-degree videos. I'm not sure whether you have seen high quality 360-degree 1080p videos that give a complete realistic feel, like a virtual tour of the city that you want to visit, right? So for example, a 360-degree tour of Amsterdam, right? So you're not just offering live activities, you're basically offering a full immersive 360 sort of activity, live activity that basically just makes you feel like you are in the destination, right? Again, like just from the perspective that you are not just in ticketing business, you are in delighting business, right? And all of these areas are something that you can actually build a business out of it, right? Because the premium and affluent customers will be willing to pay uh, a premium, right? An extra service charge on top for their travel planning to be done, right? A duty-free shopping experience, you can monetize it by saying that, you know what, there are a lot of outlets in a large airport like Changi who would love more walk-ins. They want more customers to come in. If they partner with a platform like Make My Trip, they can actually drive their discovery, right? Similarly, virtual activities can be a great way of sort of, can be a low ticket size product for uh, for like customers who have not never taken an international flight but want to experience what it feels like to be in a city like that, right? So it gives them a taste of that city, right? And so can be a small ticket sort of purchase, right, for those cities to get a feel of the city before they actually finalize whether they truly want to visit, right? So all of these sort of products actually cater to different segments which are monetizable, right? And therefore, this is something that Make My Trip can launch and make a business out of it. Whether it can be a 10% uptick is something that you again have to do the numbers and figure out. But this is a way in which you can generate some fresh ideas, right? Questions, questions, any clarifications? Okay, I'll move on. So just to give you a sense, there's already this travel company called Ctrip, which is basically the Make My Trip of China, that already does duty-free shopping. So they have this option called shopping duty-free. When you click on it, it basically gives you all the different sort of outlets. So for example, this because it picked up my location, Bangalore, so it was giving all the different options for duty-free shopping in Bangalore, right, close to the airport, right? So stuff like that you can do, right? And all of these listings can be sponsored listings, right? Think of it like Infinity Mall is paying some money to Ctrip to basically list on their platform, right? So you can actually make money out of it. And then obviously, like I said, you have to do the numbers, right? Then you have to look at the macro numbers and see whether it is worth investing in, right? So just a slide to show that monetization is possible and the market is fairly sizable, right? For example, they're saying that market for airport retail is supposed to be 9.3 billion in 2030, and currently in 2019 it was 1.4 billion, right? So the market is there and it is growing at a fairly significant pace, right? Which means that if you invest in this product today, it will continue to grow over a period of time, right? And once you get some cut of that particular sort of pie, right? If you're looking at $9.3 billion, if you even get like a 10% pie of this, that means $900 million, right? Which means your target of $500-600 million is achievable, right? But then you will come and tell me that, Anurag, you have spent so much time at Make My Trip. You already had certain fixed ideas, right? You just took those ideas, fit it in your framework, all right? And you are making us feel like that this thing is going to work, right? But this thing will work. So I will do the same thing. We'll now do the same abstraction trick, but we will do it in a different way, right? So last time I said the abstraction, last time I said that MakeMyTrip, don't think of MakeMyTrip just as a travel ticketing company. Think of it as a company that makes travel delightful. Now we will add a different spin to it, right? So let's say we say that MakeMyTrip's mission is not just to, now we are again re-articulating, again abstracting from travel and in a different way and see what newer ideas we can come up with, right? So this time I'm saying that maybe MakeMyTrip's mission is to make leisure time delightful for customers, right? Because ultimately travel is just one of the use cases for leisure time, right? People spend their leisure time traveling, right? Whenever they get time off, a lot of people love traveling, they go traveling. That is what MakeMyTrip enables. But what if I say that MakeMyTrip's mission is not just to make sort of travel meaningful? MakeMyTrip's mission is to make any kind of leisure time, at least some reasonable block of time, leisure time meaningful for its customers, right? And if you think of it that way, you get another set of ideas. And that's the beauty of this abstraction principle, right? So if I think of it from a leisure time perspective, then MakeMyTrip is in the business of making leisure time fruitful, delightful, useful for its customers. This is what you come up with, right? So for example, one of the ways people spend their leisure times is basically going to restaurants, right? Having a great meal with their family, enjoying a lovely meal, right? So what can MakeMyTrip do? If we re-articulate that mission and say that MakeMyTrip is in the business of making leisure time delightful, what we can do is say that, you know what, MakeMyTrip can launch restaurant reservations, and MakeMyTrip can list restaurants on its platform and then drive discovery of those restaurants, right? And then you will come to me and say, Anurag, what is the difference? Then you're becoming a Zomato, right? And that is where the fun bit is, right? Maybe you again re-articulate it and say that, you know what, you're not just doing regular restaurants, you're doing helping restaurants. You are already doing hotel bookings, right? A lot of these hotels are high-end hotels, chain hotels that have beautiful restaurants, right? And they want more customers coming in, right? So you take MakeMyTrip strengths, you took the leisure time angle to it, and you say that you will help drive discovery for restaurants that are there in the hotels that are listed in your platform. You already have so many different hotels listed. They have a lot of restaurants. Those hotels want to make more money. You want to enable your partners to make more money, right? So what do? You basically start driving discovery of restaurants that are there in these hotels. To think of a Taj Vivanta, right? Or think of, let's say, a Radisson, right? A Radisson or a Taj Vivanta has a lot of restaurants, right? Beautiful restaurants, Chinese, maybe Japanese, maybe Persian, I don't know, right? Just making it up, right? And they want more walk-ins, right? So why stay only in the hotel ticketing business? Maybe you don't just offer hotel ticketings, maybe you offer restaurant tickets also, right? Restaurants that are there in Taj Vivanta, restaurants that are there in Radisson, right? And then you further enhance it and say that if you think of leisure time, it is not just restaurants. People go to spas also, right? To have a great time. People go to bars and have a drink. And then there are bars in these hotels as well, right? So why don't you drive bookings for spas, restaurants, bars, etc., right? And that is a completely fresh idea, right? And how did you come up with this idea? Because you took the core sort of use case and added a spin to it, right? You thought about the mission, you abstracted the mission and said you are not just in travel space alone, you are in leisure time space, right? And then you're coming up with fresh ideas that you could have not come up with otherwise, right? So this is one way. And we'll talk about more examples, right? I will talk about the WhatsApp example in the same context because I don't want you to feel that I'm giving you only MakeMyTrip centric examples, but I wanted to carry MakeMyTrip all through the end so that you see all the different pillars for one company alone, right? So that you feel confident that the same trick can be applied to any company, any product. Any questions? Okay, so we'll move on. The next pillar for generating ideas is basically just pushing the user segmentation very, very hard, right? This is something that even I have failed to do on a few occasions in the past, right? But what I've realized is the more you push the user segmentation, right? The more you think very, very deeply about your users and what kind of different segments are there, right? And whether there are sizable segments out there that you're not serving today, that is when you come up with fresh ideas, right? So that is the second pillar. Like, don't treat your customers as homogeneous customers, right? Don't think of a flight booker as a flight booker, right? Think about his real use case. Maybe he's visiting friends and family, right? Maybe he's going for leisure, right? maybe there is a medical emergency use case. Maybe there are elderly people who are looking to travel, right? Or maybe they're doing the international travel for the first time, right? That is when you start visualizing every single detail of your users, right? User persona, your users, right? And you do your dicing of your user segmentation so well that you are able to come up with fresh ideas. Until unless you dice your users properly, you will not be able to, because when you think of a flight booker as a flight booker, you have lost all the information about the user, right? You're just thinking, okay, a flight booker. And that does not trigger your brain, right? Nothing will come to your mind, right? For example, when I ask the same question, right? The question that I posed earlier, right? How do you improve the conversion of flights booking process by 1%? Most of the people in an interview setting are not able to go beyond discounts. Like this happens over and over again when I ask that question in an interview. 95% of the PMs, or maybe 98% of the PMs, are not even able to think beyond discounts, right? The only thing they can think of is discounts because they're not thinking users. They've completely forgotten the core thing, which is like think about users, and not just the standard segmentation, go as deep as possible. We'll talk about some examples. So the typical segmentation that people are able to do is demographic segmentation, right? So they will think about age and gender, right? A male or a female, right? Or maybe different age buckets. So less than 25 years of age, 25 to, let's say, some mid age, right? 45 years of age, 45 plus, right? Then they'll talk about income levels. If they are really good, maybe they will talk about location and geography, right? But this is at best people can come up with, right? Now here is the problem. A age or a gender sort of segmentation, let's say in make matter flights context, will not give you any fresh ideas. There's no difference in how a woman thinks or a man thinks when it comes to a flight booking, right? In both cases, the only idea that will come to you is, oh, both are looking for discounts, right? Similarly, from an age context, maybe people become slightly less sort of discount, sort of leaning when they mature and age, right? And maybe more cash is coming into their hands, but eventually that will also not give you any fresh ideas, right? When you do standard segmentation, you are stuck with standard or routine answers that will come to your brain. Nothing unique, nothing new will come to your brain. So how do you do it? You go further, right? You start using use cases as an anchor for segmentation, right? Large use cases, right? So for example, in make my trips context, that could be business versus leisure traveler. A business traveler has very different needs from a leisure traveler, right? So again, you're thinking about the different scenarios, thinking about different user personas, and then picking segments that are sizable, right? So business versus leisure is a very strong segment, right? Then behavioral segmentation, right? New user versus repeat user. New user behaves very differently from a repeat user. For the lack of a better word, I put technographic segmentation, but basically that means what kind of device the user is using to access your platform, right? Is he using a high-end phone? Is he using a low-end phone? And then life stage segmentation, right? So is the user a single traveler, a couple traveler, a family traveler? These are segmentation cases that make sense in make my trips context, right? A lot of these will make sense in other contexts also, right? So for example, the new user versus repeat user will make sense in any e-commerce context, right? The high-end device versus low-end device, even if you are a Flipkart product manager, it will make sense for you. The single couple family will also make sense even in a horizontal e-commerce context, right? In travel context, it becomes even more important, right? Because a family traveler has very different needs from a couple traveler, has very different needs from a single traveler, right? So you have to think of other interesting ways, right? You have to micro segment to come up with fresh ideas. You need to kind of go to the source, which is the user, and keep micro segmenting and think about how can you cut your user population in creative ways so that you get creative answers out of it, right? So now what kind of products can come out of it? Love you guys to come up with something. So let's take new user versus repeat user. Any of you want to take a stab on what could we build for new user versus repeat user? How can the platform experience be different for a new user versus repeat user? Any ideas, creative ideas? I would love you guys to maybe talk about a few ideas that you have.
Repeat users can have recommendations based on their past history to make their app experience better. New users can have the app to look very basic and easier to use for them. so that they don't easily drop off, maybe.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So you can even go all the way to saying that for a new user, the funnel experience, the booking experience looks very, very different, right? Maybe it is simplified. You're not doing all the bells and whistles in one go, right? So let's say up to 10 visits or 20 visits or 30 visits. You're saying that, let's say if the guy comes to book a flight, I don't want to show him 10 different steps. Maybe he just does 3, 4 different steps, the most important steps for booking a flight. You don't want to maybe at the same point of time try to get him to book an airport cab. He's experiencing your product for the first time, right? So don't push an airport cab, don't push a travel insurance, don't push a meal, don't push a seat selection, right? Keep the first time experience really, really simple for the user. A repeat user who has already experienced your platform, right? So instead of so for a new user, keep probably only 4 steps. For a repeat user, once he has experienced the platform, you can start peddling him a airport cab. Maybe that adds to his convenience. Maybe you start peddling him a meal, right? So if you do only 3 steps for your new user, his conversion will definitely improve instead of doing 10 steps, which you are doing for your repeat user as well, right? So that is how you will creatively, you can redesign the funnel completely. For a repeat user, for a power user, you have a lot of user preferences, right? Maybe you already know that he always takes an airport cab, right? Or he's an affluent guy, would prefer an airport cab, right? So maybe you just bundle the offering and say that for this guy, the airport cab selection is not a separate step, it's a bundled step. And when he goes in, he directly chooses that, right? And I have an example at the end which shows this, right? So all these kinds of things you can do, right? So which is why I said when you cut your user base creatively, you will get creative ideas. So thank you so much for that answer. So the third pillar, what is the third pillar? So you have done the user segmentation creatively. But another thing you have to do is basically think about every micro step very, very deeply, right? And once you visualize every micro step very, very deeply in your brain is when you start getting very fresh and creative ideas. I'll talk about the discounting idea, right? Most of the guys get stuck at discounting. In this talk, I will talk about how the same discounting could be done in 20 different ways, right? What are the 20 different use cases? And how did I come up with that? Because I'm trying to visualize everything, right? Like I'm trying to put myself into the user's shoes and trying to visualize every step. Like what are the kind of challenges I go through personally? What are the kind of challenges a user would go through, right? And you're trying to understand every single step. You're not ignoring any small detail, right? So let's take an example. So the same example, right? How will you improve the conversion of Make My Trip flight booking process by 1%, right? And the only answer that comes to people's mind is, okay, Make My Trip in India, users are very economy conscious, right? They're looking for cheapest flights. So the problem statement basically reduces to how do I find the cheapest flights for my travel, right? And they keep coming up with really boring answers around this only, right? Which is basically around how do you surface more discounts, more discounts, more discounts, communication, notification, all that nonsense keeps coming, right? 99% of the interviews, right? Now, if I articulate the same problem in a different manner, right? How do I find the cheapest flights? Let's see in what different levels. And here what I'm doing is I'm visualizing every micro step. So let's see. The cheapest flight problem itself is a multi-layered problem, right? So for example, in one case is my destination is not fixed. How do I find the cheapest flight across multiple different destinations? So I'll give you a really practical problem, right? So let's say again, what I did, how did I come up with this list? I actually thought about the user and thought about all the different steps that are going in his brain, that are all the different considerations that it might be going through. Imagine you are planning your first international travel, right? And you're trying to figure out whether you want to go to Singapore, whether you want to go to Thailand, whether you want to go to Bali, whether you want to go to Malaysia, right? So the problem is that you want to do international travel, but your destination is not fixed, right? And what you're looking for is basically do a great destination in a fairly economical manner, right? So the problem statement here is how do we find the cheapest flight across destinations? So this is a multi-destination thing, right? In international context. Second scenario is your travel dates are not fixed, right? So you are open to sort of keeping your travel schedule flexible, right? And then you're looking to basically optimize. You're not just looking for cheapest flight on a given day. You are basically looking to, you are flexible with your dates. You're looking to move your dates to get the cheapest flight in potentially a month or a week, right? So you may be looking to visit your family, right? And you are okay, right? You can shift your vacation schedule to basically visit your family in any week of the month, right? So you're basically what you're looking for is the cheapest flight across month, right? So again, it's not cheapest flight on a single day, right? Third thing is you can potentially travel, right? And but your travel is tentative, but you are also worried, right? Because again, you're kind of visualizing the user scenario, right? So your travel is tentative. You may have the need to travel, but then uh, it might not materialize, right? Which means you may end up canceling the booking and incur a lot of cancellation charges. But then you are also worried that if you don't lock in your fare prices now, you will get stuck, right? Because later on the flights will become really, really expensive and you will have to pay a bomb. So what is he looking for? He is looking for a product that gives him the cheapest experience in this particular context, right? When your travel dates are tentative, you are looking for an offering from someone like a Make My Trip or a Clear Trip or a Yatra that can give you a bundle offering, right? Which gives you a cheapest experience for this kind of scenario, right? And this is a very common scenario, right? Like, how can I maybe potentially uh, book the flight tickets today, right? And maybe buy something on top of it that make sure that I don't have to incur a cancellation charge later, right? So you're looking for the cheapest experiences in this context. And then maybe some of the standard sort of stuff, right? Like you have a specific Axis Bank card, you have a specific Citibank card, and you are unable to discover the offers for your card. MakeMyTrip is known to offer specific bank sort of offers, right? And you are not interested in all the generic offers. You are looking for a very personalized sort of offer experience that you have already declared to MakeMyTrip. You know what? I have a Citibank card, I have a ICICI Bank card. Show me only offers that are relevant to me. Don't badger me with the bazillion offers that are running on your platform, right? And all of these are use cases for the user to find the cheapest flight. So cheapest flight is not just cheapest flight. Hey, you sorted by cheapest and you are done, right? That is what 99% of the candidates are able to come up with. You have to put cheapest in the user's context. Don't forget about the user. Think about all the different user scenarios, what kind of considerations that might be going through in his mind when you visualize every micro step, right? So the first thing came because I thought about the international flight use case in a planning phase, right? Second thing was I was thinking about second idea came to my mind because I was thinking about user's use case in a scenario where now he's in active consideration stage, right? He has already finalized the destination, but now he's trying to maybe optimize for the dates for his travel, right? So that he can get the cheapest experience. In third case, I'm talking about a typical scenario where he's worried the trade-off both ways you are stuck. If you don't book today, you end up booking a very expensive flight later on, and if you book it today, you end up incurring a cancellation cost, right? So there is something maybe potentially a platform like MakeMyTrip can do, right? We already have that offering today, which is called a cancellation protect. So you pay an additional premium on top of your flight booking. You end up paying maybe 700 or 800 bucks, but then you don't end up paying the cancellation charges, which are typically 3,000, 3,500 bucks. Right. And the fourth, again, right, the typical scenario, you run a lot of bank offers. So the user is actually looking for a personalized bank offer experience, not all the bazillion offers that are gazillion offers that are running on your platform, right? If you do all of these, hopefully you are able to improve your flights conversion by 1%, right? Obviously, you will have to look at all of these hypotheses, run some experiments, see what the upside is, and then eventually figure out whether you are able to get to that number. But this is how you generate ideas, right? People get stuck with deals and discounts. This is how you even take the simplest construct of finding cheapest flights, put them in different user contexts, and you end up coming up with very creative ideas, right? Ideas that you will never, you will not be able to come up with if you're not thinking in this manner, right? So this is the third pillar. The fourth pillar is also something. See, ultimately, eventually, the platforms are evolving, the ecosystem is evolving, right? So if you want to come up with creative ideas, you want to take something that is currently the latest and greatest thing, a cutting edge thing, and then see whether you can put it into one of your user use cases, right? And that also works really, really nicely. How are we doing with time? Are we? Yeah, we have a bit of time. So pick up something that you know is currently the ecosystem has evolved, the platform has evolved, something that is slightly cutting edge, bleeding edge, right? And then you see whether you can use one of those things in your context, in your users context. In for example, in MakeMyTrip's case, it will be travel context, right? So for example, trendy stuff, data science, AR, VR, right? So example, take a few examples. One example is, let's say a user never books a particular offering with me, right? For example, even though I'm a MakeMyTrip employee, I've never booked a holiday package with MakeMyTrip. Probably will never ever will, right? I have a booking history with MakeMyTrip of probably 10 plus years, right? I will probably never book a holiday package. Why keep showing a holiday package to someone like me, right? Maybe you can use that spot for maybe an airport cab offering for me, which I use very, very frequently, right? If I know, so these are all data science led, right? So you're basically personalizing the home screen of the product, right? And basically giving visibility to those products that make sense for this particular user. And maybe some of the other offerings don't make sense for this user. So it is okay to basically put them in the shelf, right? Or maybe put them in the side drawer, right? I don't even care booking a holiday package ever with MakeMyTrip, right? Then another data science led idea could be, I know the travel patterns of a certain user. I know this guy always travels to his hometown on Diwali, right? So can I basically proactively show him recommendations? Imagine this guy takes a train, right? And trains typically have an availability issue, right? The supply is much lesser than the demand, right? Especially on occasions like Diwali, right? So can you do something to basically proactively tell the customer that, you know what, train bookings are opening up, right? There is a 120-day sort of so basically, train reservations open up 120 days before the travel, right? So you basically give some customized persuasions to the user. You know what, that the window for train booking has opened up. Why don't you basically go ahead and book it now? Because if you don't do it now, the tickets will get sold out, right? When I know that the customer is a premium customer, I can basically customize my offering by offering him a bundled air flight plus airport cabs experience, right? I'll show you an example. So these are data science led ideas, right? AR, VR ideas, right? So again, you think of it from a data science lens, you will be able to, and then you map it back to your user's use case, you will be able to come up with fresh creative ideas, right? For example, AR, VR ideas, right? So AR, VR ideas, for example, typical AR, VR idea would be on trip, right? On trip, you are typically taking photos, pictures, right? You are basically pointing your camera, right? So can I, let's say on an international destination, can I build an offering within the MakeMyTrip app where you point a camera at a point of interest, right? And it shows you interesting content, right? So basically the content basically uh, gets pulled up on the camera screen, right? So you're just pointing your camera, right? So let's say you are in Paris, right? Or you're pointing, pretty much people know, most of the people know about Eiffel Tower, but let's say you are in front of the Notre Dame Cathedral, right? And you are completely mesmerized by the beautiful architecture of that building, and you're wondering what is this building, right? Just point your camera on top of it, towards it, right? And interesting trivia comes up, right? Which says that, hey, this is the Notre Dame Cathedral, which is built in so and so year, right? And it is one of the largest cathedrals in the entire world, etc., etc., right? And that gives you a delightful customer experience, right? And it is also a trendy sort of AR, VR idea, right? So if you come up with an idea like this, right, this is something that can potentially catch, sort of get a lot of currency with your stakeholders, right? Be it in the organization, or if you come up with an idea in an interview setting, this is something that will show to the interviewer that you have a lot of creativity, right? So take a trendy area and then map it back to your scenario, your use cases, and you will be able to come up with creative ideas that you will not get normally, right? So this is the fourth pillar, right? So these are the four pillars, right? So the first pillar is re-articulating the mission. The second pillar is deep micro segmentation, customer segmentation. The third pillar is basically visualizing the customer journey really, really vividly. And the fourth pillar is take a trendy area and then map it back to your scenarios, to your use cases. And in by doing these four techniques, you will be able to come up with really fresh ideas that normal people are not able to come up with, right? And the biggest challenge, like we said right in the beginning, is that coming up with good ideas when most of the usual ideas are exhausted, or you are in an interview setting, is the biggest challenge for most of the people, right? So by using these 4 areas, you will be able to really shine in whatever scenario, be it in a professional setting or in an interview setting, right? Just to quickly sort of conclude this. So for example, the flights plus airport transfers, right? So you just immediately, instead of giving the flight option only, you give a bundle flight plus airport cab sort of experience. In this case, you put the, you're not even specifying airports. You're just putting your home and final drop location, and the airports automatically get calculated from that, right? So you put some Gurgaon location, automatically it puts Delhi, you put Indira Nagar, and automatically it picks Bangalore, right? It automatically infers the airport thing out of it, and then it gives you a bundled airport, flight plus airport cab offering, which is a delightful experience because I know this user, I'm not giving this option to everyone. I'm giving this option to those users who I know are premium users, typically end up booking airport cabs through me, right? So if they, in any case, end up booking airport cab through me, why make them go through the hassle of booking it separately? Why not just add it like this, right? Which feels much more native, which feels much more logical, right? So I would halt at this point of time, and we'll talk about a few more cases, which are more sort of generic cases, questions asked in a real product interview setting. I would like to stop at this point of time, and would just want to ask you guys if you have any questions. Any questions, doubts? I'm just putting my camera off for a bit. I would like to take some questions now, and then we can do the interview questions that I have planned for you guys. Yes. Yes, Ankur. Go ahead.
Hey, hi, Anurag. It's really a good session to follow through, and I think you really made a huge point. Just a small question, like as and when we came across the product sense question, right? Generally, the idea is we have to know what is the mission of a certain product directly from the interviewer, and then try to solicit the user pain points in general. So what exercise do you think will be much more better, like come up with user personas which are can be the power users of a product, or then try search for a context and define a mission, a
Yeah.
possible mission? Or is it good to go forward and ask for a possible mission, just try to come up with the context and then try to narrow down the problem, and then go about and give a product sense answer? What would you think is the best way to tackle that question, the first question, the obvious question?
Great, great, fantastic. So, thank you so much, Andrew. That means that you have really been listening, and thank you so much for that wonderful question. It's a wonderful question, right? So here is how I solve for it, right? I know that if I stick to the standard sort of mission of the company, right? So I might struggle to come up with good, high quality answers, right? So what I typically do, my strategy always is to, you know what, articulate a few options for the interviewer, right? And ask the interviewer himself whether it is okay to take that liberty, right? And the interview is really orthodox, right? Or the interview is really dogmatic and says that, you know what, I'm not allowing you to take this liberty. You have to stay in the confines of the current mission as it is articulated on the company page, or as it is currently today, then you stick to it, right? But basically, what I typically do is I have a very standard structure of solving product design questions where I, so that's my own personal framework where I talk about goals, assumptions, and constraints. And as part of the goal section, that's the first step I do: goals, assumptions, constraints. As part of the goal section, I articulate a few goals for the interviewer, right? That, okay, current mission of the company is this. There are certain ideas that I can give you from this bucket, and I also feel that the current goal can be re-articulated in this way that is still sort of honest to its current mission, right? And based on that current, the re-articulation, I am willing to give you a few more ideas. Are you okay with it or are you not, right? And if the interviewer is completely orthodox and says, no, that mission does not work, then you stick to the tried and tested sort of mission, right? If the interviewer is open, which is what the case is mostly, right? The interviewers are very open and they're looking for creative and fresh ideas. They will say that, yes, that sounds pretty interesting. That is, if you're re-articulating the mission in that manner, it still feels like it is kind of honest and consistent to our current mission. please go ahead and basically break it down and see if we can come up with something more creative from that bucket. That also that is how it typically sort of ends up being, right? In fact, if anything, by articulating that, you are giving a signal to the interviewer that you are thinking of it in a really fresh manner, in a creative manner. So you have nothing to lose. You will in fact get brownie points. Even if the interviewer says that no, don't go in that direction, you will still get brownie points for articulating that for the interviewer, right? That tells the interviewer that you are thinking in a fresh manner. You are not just thinking how everyone else is thinking. At all points of time, however, you have to get the buy-in from the interviewer.
Yeah, that makes sense, Anurag. I think the first step is to make sure come up with a small goals, assumptions, and criteria. I think that would definitely filter, the sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
the.
thank you. And thank you so much for that wonderful question. That's a practical problem that people face. So thank you so much. Anything else? Happy to take more questions. Any doubts with respect to the examples that I mentioned? I think please feel free. Don't be shy. Happy to answer as many questions as possible. Because it's the first time I'm presenting these pillars to you, so maybe some of the things might not be clear immediately.
Yes, sir, I have one question.
Yeah.
That how do we relate our concept of crunching the numbers to the interview? Like first we have made clear our ideas and points according to the pillars that you just mentioned. Now, when it
Hmm.
comes to numbers, how do we explain them that articulately that it should relate with our ideas? And
Sorry,
sometimes
Rohan.
the
Can
numbers.
can you be a little louder? So I just missed the last part.
Yeah, so I was saying that how should we explain the concept of numbers about our ideas? That yes, this is our idea and this is how the numbers will work and it should work. So how are we supposed to explain in that?
Okay. Got it. Understood. So great question again. Thank you so much, Rohan. So, so here is how you do it, right? So depends on the intent of the question, right? A typical product design question, if you look at it, uh, if I had to kind of really sharpen the intent of my presentation, I'm literally preparing you for a product design question, right? A product design question typically does not have numbers, right? In a product design question, the interviewer is actually asking you to do kind of unconstrained thinking and put a fresh spin on things. The numbers bit, I will come to it. I will come to it because in a professional setting, you have to do the numbers as well. And in some other product question types also, you have to do that. But generally, the biggest problem to start with is like coming up with good ideas, which is the part I covered. Now, coming to the numbers bit, right? Let's say you are able to come up with 4 or 5 good high quality ideas, right? And typical thing to do in product design is to finally stack rank which idea makes most sense, right? And the two real dimensions for it is basically, does it really make a lot of sense for the user? And two, how big this problem is, right? Which is the numbers bit, right? So, but the first lever is basically, will it truly resonate with the customer? How big a customer problem it is? Is it a real big pain point? That is the first filter, right? So let's say you get done with the filter and you still end up with, in your scenario, let's say you still end up with 2, 3 different options, right? So you can ask the interviewer whether you want me to do the numbers, right? And if the interviewer says, okay, I want you to do the numbers, to choose one between these three, you can say all three of these options look legit. They look fairly sizable pain points, right? So we can basically pick all three of them and do it sequentially. Or if you want me to really stack rank them, we can do the numbers. And the way to do the numbers is basically, like I said, go top down, right? Like a typical guesstimate, right? You start with, let's say, if I'm trying to size this, right? So I will start with, let's say, the airport shopping example that I took, right? So I will start with the number of typical flyers in India, right? And then I will try and attach some dollar amount to a typical dollar spend based on my personal experience, right? So maybe on a typical trip, I end up spending, let's say, 1,500 bucks, right? Which is roughly $20 on food and beverages, right? On a trip, right? And maybe I do some shopping, which is maybe another 1,500, 2,000 bucks, right? Which is another $30, right? So you add a dollar amount to it. So you kind of derive the international flyer number, then you add the dollar number that you do on a typical spend, right? And then you eventually sort of make some legit assumptions. You arrive at a a complete dollar number, a full dollar number, right? You take the number of international flights, you do but times multiply it with the average spend per user on a typical international airport setting, right? And then you arrive at the final dollar number that you communicate to the user, and do it to a similar exercise for the second option and similar exercise for the third option, right? So the key thing is to make very legit assumptions about the use case, and B, the real goal is to make the minimum number of assumptions possible. If you make too many assumptions in that guesstimate process, you will end up with a completely sort of misleading number, right? So go down a path that in which you have to make the minimum number of assumptions, and you arrive at some kind of a figure that seems to make sense. Again, in this particular case, the interviewer is not really looking for the exact number. The interviewer is just looking for the thought process again, whether you are structuring the problem and breaking down the problem the right way, and are you giving legit numbers for each of the assumptions that you're making as part of the calculation process that you're doing, right? And if those assumptions look legit, then the final number is immaterial, right? The final number is just sort of a proxy, right? So just have to be smart and creative about picking a path that lets you estimate those numbers and make some legit assumptions about all those inputs, and then eventually arrive at some kind of a number. So the expectation is that if you are solving a product strategy case, right? In a product strategy case, you are required to make those trade-offs. You cannot get away by saying, okay, all these three options look good, let's roll with it, right? In a product strategy case, for example, let's say if I had to ask you a question like, should Hotstar offer a subscription only model or a hybrid model or a free model like Geo Cinema, right? You are actually supposed to calculate the revenue numbers in each of those cases, and then eventually come up with the option which one makes most sense for Hotstar, right? So you are required to crunch the numbers. So that is kind of the guesstimates part of it, right? And if you are the guesstimate strategy, like I said, is choose a path that is simple enough. You don't have to make too many convoluted assumptions. Make some legit assumptions about each of those inputs, and just arrive at the number, and just then benchmark those numbers against each other. Does that answer the question?
Yes, yes, sir, very much, very much. And I do understand that first we need to prioritize our idea according to the use from the user's perspective, and then we come down to
Yes.
the numbers if the
Yes.
interviewers want.
Yes, absolutely.
And solve it in a guesstimate kind of way.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Welcome. I think Sanket has a question, which he is putting in chat. What are the daily dashboard core metrics measured by a product guy from North Star to L0, L1? The great question, Sanket. Let me address that. Uh, so, it, so what happens really that in a practical product setting, what ends up happening is every guy is sort of like you are put in charge of some functional area, right? So if I had to give you the make my trip example again, right? Someone is looking after the flights business unit, right? Someone is looking after the hotels business unit, right? And and so for a flights guy, the core metrics, yes, some metrics would remain standard, right? So for example, for any e-commerce guy, be it Make My Trip or be it Flipkart, one of the key sort of core metrics would be conversion, right? How many users who are coming eventually are buying your product, right? Then the second key metric would be new user percentage. How many new users you are able to attract, like what percentage of your traffic is basically new users, right? Or what percentage of your transactions are new users. That basically tells you that your product is good at converting new users, right? Another core metric would be the repeat rate. Like once the user experiences the product, does he repeat, right? So those kinds of things are there. But then there will be contextual things, right? So for example, we know that typically travel starts with a flight booking, right? Typically, right? So for a hotels guy, there will be one more sort of core metric, which will be like, if the guy has booked a flight on my platform, am I able to sell him a hotel, right? Right. So which we call as a trip attach, right? So that will be unique to the hotels guy. That will not really make a lot of sense for the flights guy. Or think of it from the airport cabs guy perspective, right? Someone who's looking after the airport cabs product on our platform, right? Again, one of the core metrics that he'll be looking for is for all those users who are booking flights on Make My Trip, am I able to sell a airport cab to this guy, right? So again, the trip attach rate would become important for an airport cabs guy. I look after growth. So my metrics are slightly different, right? So I'm not responsible for transactions. I'm responsible for shifting my user as seamlessly as possible into the funnels, right? So one of the core metrics that I look for is basically how many of those users who come to the homepage of Make My Trip, how many of those users end up in one of the flight booking, in one of the booking funnels, be it a flight booking or hotel booking, right? What we call in Make My Trip's internal parlance is shoppers, right? Whether I'm getting the guy to shop, right? How efficient I'm becoming, or one of the other core metrics that I look at is logins, right? What percentage of our users, what percentage of our traffic is logged in? Because if the user is logged in, I'm able to serve him a much more personalized experience, right? So login rate is one of the core sort of metrics for me, right? So it tends to kind of differ from product to product. A post-sales guy would be looking at net promoter score, right? Or the CX scores, right? Or he'll be looking at dissat scores. Another key metric for me, at least, is app ratings, right? Because I kind of control the homepage experience. That's the first page that the user sees, right? So it tends to kind of differ from group to group, right? And eventually, hopefully, if each of those guys are looking after their so-called input metrics, right? These are eventually input matrices that go into the final revenue for the company. So we are looking after our output matrices properly, which is eventually the input metrics for the company. Hopefully, the revenue for the company will grow, right? So that is how it is kind of structured from sort of the core metric to then further down. Does that answer?
Uh, uh, Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for your answer, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you
Anything
so much.
else?
No, no.
Okay, so I'll quickly move to, let's do one product case. Unfortunately, we are way beyond time. I'll just quickly ask Sakshi if,
Yeah, I think we have crossed some time. So would that take a lot of time, Anurag? The question that we're trying to solve here. I think that would be
so,
really useful though. But yeah, let's do that.
yeah, I just felt that maybe I will do one non-make my trip example, which is improve WhatsApp, right? And just sort of show the same example again from WhatsApp's lens. But
Sure.
maybe I can quickly maybe share some slides later on which people can read through.
Yeah,
It's the
that would be
same
great.
principles applied on the slide, so I can share the slides and people can read through it and they will be able to understand.
Right. Sure.
Okay, so I think I got one last question, which is Amit, which says, could you also share an example where you have seen a unique or initial debatable idea which was implemented and made a big impact from the experience? Understood. That's a great question again. Thank you, Amit, for that question. So I have done quite a few shady and debatable things in my broad career, because ultimately what I care about is the user experience. So one of the products that I launched was a really scary and a debatable product, which is when I was leading trains at Make My Trip. And basically in the trains business, the biggest problem for users is availability, right? Like I said already, right? uh, on in peak travel season, let's say Diwali, Dashera, train tickets are already sold out. There are only few good trains that are running on a certain route. Lots of people cannot afford flights, right? So what we basically built was basically so today what happens if you go to our CTC or you go to a reservation system counter, you basically end up paying money to basically book a waitlisted ticket, right? Uh, uh, okay, got it. I'll do the case, Devesh. No worries. So So what we ended up doing was basically we just spun that idea and said that why even pay money to get into the queue, right? Ultimately, the travel is not guaranteed, right? You are booking a waitlisted ticket, but there is no guarantee that the waitlisted ticket will get confirmed, and yet you are forced to block that money, right? So what we ended up booking was basically a at pay sorry book without paying anything upfront, right? So you basically on Make My Trip, you could, or rather the sister brand GoIvivo, which is where I was, you could basically book a waitlisted ticket without paying any money, and you had to pay money only when the waitlisted ticket became confirmed, right? So that was a completely unique, distinct offering, completely different from IRCTC, which immediately sort of improved our sort of transaction rates, right? At that point of time, we were doing about 8,000 train tickets a day. Immediately, it jumped to we saw a big jump in the waitlisted tickets getting booked on a platform, of course, right? Because it was great convenience. So not blocking any money to book the ticket. So the typical share of waitlisted tickets in the 8,000 tickets a day that we were doing was roughly around 60%, which is 4,800 tickets. So from 5,000 tickets a day, we immediately went to 8,000 tickets. So we added additional 3,000 tickets a day, just like that. The day we opened the platform for this, we had some risk measures, we had some sort of caps enforced, but immediately in a single day, 5,000 from 5,000 waitlisted tickets a day, we went to 8,000 waitlisted tickets a day in a single day. That was a 60% jump in one day, right? But then eventually, and then we were basically looking at how many people are actually paying up the money post confirmation, right? And those numbers were also looking relatively healthy. So there was a lot of debate around it when we proposed this idea to our leadership team, and they were saying that we're taking a lot of credit risk for a lot of users. But it turned out that the users were actually genuine and were not abusing this feature. Having said that, we had to eventually turn it off because there was an implementation glitch. We were not getting a true picture of all the train tickets that were getting confirmed. So few users actually managed to get a free ride. And plus IRCTC turned us off, saying that you cannot offer a feature like this because that basically takes traffic away from my platform onto your platform, right? So IRCTC, being a government monopoly, they provide all the supply, and hence they were able to shut us down, saying that you are not allowed to do this based on the contractual agreements, right? So eventually we had to shut it down. So there was a lot of debate. It happens a lot every time you propose a new idea. There is always a lot of debate, but eventually you somehow either con your leadership into agreeing to it, or you basically agree to their viewpoint and not launch it, right? So that's the typical life. Okay, so Divij requested that we do the WhatsApp case study, so I will quickly do it. Right. So same thing, right? Improve WhatsApp, right? So if I had to ask you that question, that you know what, improve WhatsApp for me, right? So I already gave you a teaser, right? So I will, at least in my mind, not think of it WhatsApp only as a communication or a calling thing, right? I would think of WhatsApp as something that is connecting people, right? So that is one pillar that you can use, right? So if you think of WhatsApp as connecting people, here are some of the answers that you can come up with. This slide talks about some of the other things that you can do, right? So you can also talk about that, you know what, WhatsApp has already solved for acquiring users, so adoption is already great, and WhatsApp already does a great job of uh, sort of giving a great product experience to those users. So maybe you take a completely new goal, right? That is another strategy. You pick a completely new goal and say, you know what, WhatsApp's goal right now is monetization. And you talk about all the interesting ways in which WhatsApp can monetize, which it is not doing currently. Here, the advantage is that WhatsApp has not done any monetization whatsoever, right? So you can come up with a lot of creative ideas. The strategy you used here is basically just changing the lens of the product to a goal which they have not done anything, right? And which makes sense, right? Now that they have a lot of installed base, a lot of users, right? So you just talk about monetization, go deep within monetization, and you talk about things that you could do to improve monetization in WhatsApp. That is one very good strategy of coming up with fresh ideas, right? For example, in monetization, you can have stuff like paid support handles for corporates, right? The entire sort of WhatsApp business API, right? Then you can do stuff like maybe similar to Twitter, you can have verified profiles, right? And basically, once you have a verified profile, you are allowed to uh, you link it to the security of the platform, right? So once you have a verified profile, you can maybe WhatsApp unknown numbers. Else, you are not allowed until unless that user basically accepts you, right? So you just take the monetization angle and you think of it from all the different lens. Can you add a subscription layer to it? Right? Can you add a ads layer to it, right? Is there some way where maybe businesses can run ads, targeted ads for users, right? All the different ways in which you monetize. Can you add an API layer to it, right? Can WhatsApp become a platform and not just a communication mechanism, right? Maybe, uh, like I said, right, the WhatsApp can offer a business to business API to platforms to basically push their messages, right? Which is what they're already doing currently, right? And they monetize their API, right? uh, More creative ways is, can WhatsApp itself become, because people spend so much time on WhatsApp, can WhatsApp become an e-commerce platform in itself? Something that WeChat has already done in China, right? So basically you have mini stores within WhatsApp where people can order products within WhatsApp itself, right? Which is what the GeoMart integration is, right? Geo is partnering with WhatsApp in a big way, where the entire sort of buying experience come within WhatsApp, right? So you take monetization as an angle and you just go very deep into it. So that's a goal that has not been done on WhatsApp properly till now. And you go very deep into it. You think about all the different layers in which WhatsApp could monetize, right? And then basically you come up with fresh creative ideas from that direction. That's one way of doing it, right? The other way of doing it is the pillar way that I talked about, right? So you re-articulate the mission and you say WhatsApp is not just a communication platform, it's a platform for connecting people, right? So when it becomes a platform for connecting people, what are the different things for which people connect, right? So people connect to solve for a certain goal, right? You see a lot of WhatsApp groups where people come together and say that, okay, let's say the kids come together and trying to plan a birthday party for their friend, right? So that's the community thing, right? So people coming together, or let's say people coming together and trying to support a green cause, right? So can you add a community angle to it, right? So that becomes like the communication mechanism. Now, if you add a community angle to it, then the community itself needs to have all the different sort of mechanisms, right? There has to be a bulletin board mechanisms. You should be able to schedule events, right? You should be able to maybe fundraise for a cause, right? So once you start adding that connecting people lens to it, you start getting a lot of fresh ideas. You get the community idea, you get the bulletin board idea, then you take the community idea further deeper and maybe you go into the hyper local community angle, right? So think of a MyGate, right? MyGate is effectively a hyper local community. There is no reason why WhatsApp cannot get into MyGate space, right? In apartment complexes, people are living together, right? And it's like a hyper local community, right? They're talking to each other on MyGate. Why can't the same thing happen on a WhatsApp community, right? So you have like a MyGate flow of sorts within WhatsApp, right? Then given that people are already spending so much time on WhatsApp, you could have even feeds like news feeds, right? Local news, right? Because you have to have that local angle to it, right? Because you're talking about connecting people, right? So you can have a local news feed within WhatsApp, right? So that idea is not even listed on it. I just came up with it on the fly, that you have a local news feed within your WhatsApp, which basically talks about all the different things that are going around in the 5 kilometer radius around you, right? So which store is open, which store is shutting, which new sort of showroom is coming up, right? Where can you get milk today, right? So all of those things, basically almost like a local thing, right? Then you go further deeper, right? And you say that, you know what, I want to customize WhatsApp completely for a large population like India, which is a very large market for me, and I want to like really increase that community feeling, right? So you talk about local sensibilities, right? So why should the emojis only be the standard emojis? Maybe you have local emojis, right? So you talk about maybe how do you basically celebrate a Lohri? How do you celebrate a Holi? Right? How do you have gifs and stickers for that? All of that, like very neatly integrated within WhatsApp, right? So all of those things, right? Then you take the other angle, right? So let's talk about video calls, audio calls, right? Maybe you want to communicate with someone in Japan, right? Over WhatsApp. Is there a way to real time translate that communication, right? So again, you are kind of taking that connecting people thing and then basically layering more and more different use cases on it, right? Now the kind of ideas that you're coming up with is not chat-led ideas. You're not talking about side draws. You're not talking about ranking, right? You're talking about completely fresh ideas that WhatsApp has not done so far, right? So these are this is how you can use one of the pillars that I talked about and solve very tough problem statements. Like I'm telling you, like an interview setting, if I give you a problem like improve WhatsApp, you will not be able to come up with any fresh ideas. That used to happen to me as well, right? Because in our minds, it's a perfect product. The only way to do it is basically abstracting the mission, right? So you do that and then you start looking at the same problem from a different lens and you start getting fresh ideas. For example, another idea, again, it is not here, was like, is there a way I can find people who have common interests and can I connect with them over WhatsApp, right? So almost like a Facebook within WhatsApp of sorts, right? So people start sharing some of their interests, and then I find and I have certain interests. So maybe I care about pets and there are other people in my city who care about pets, right? Or in my local community, I add that local angle to it. And okay, 10 people come together who have a similar love for pets. They come together and they do some certain activities together, right? So all of those ideas can come in, right? Where WhatsApp can ask people to disclose their interest purely sort of voluntarily, and then they kind of give you a feed of interesting people around you with whom you can connect. You can almost go in the dating direction also if you wanted to, right? So those are all the different ways in which you could potentially improve WhatsApp, and are completely new ideas that normal people would not come up with in an interview setting. Hope that helps. Any questions? I'm happy to sort of talk about WhatsApp more. Devich, are you happy or you want more examples?
So I'm pretty happy with the example, and thank you for like taking out the extra time here. I just had one question here, and
Yeah.
given that WhatsApp has so many things, and like probably like you were just also like winging it, and like we can also come across these many ideas during the interview. There would be like the next phase of this would then come on to the prioritization bit. That
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
these are the ideas. How do you choose? So like, do you have a point of view on like how we can go about that part of the question also?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So here is how I would do it, right? If I had to give you my process of doing it. So what I would do is basically, like I said, this was the generating ideas part of it. But the very first thing, if you look at this slide, the first thing is to basically agree with the interviewer on what the goal is, right? And you give the user, give your interviewer all these different options, right? You tell him, uh, we can either talk about, so the way you would start is you will say that here are some of the potential goals that can be there for WhatsApp, right? WhatsApp already has a very large installed base, so user acquisition is probably not something that you are looking for. Let me know if you're looking for it, right? So if user acquisition becomes like the goal, then you come up with a completely different list, right? Similarly, retaining users is also probably not a problem, right? So the only thing that remains, right, if you look at the typical goals of a product, which is acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and one more thing, right? I think referral. Yeah, the R sort of model, right? So you already have solved for acquisition, you have already solved for activation, you have already solved for retention. The only thing left to sort of solve for is the revenue, right? So then you say that revenue can be a very important angle to this, and let's talk about monetization. Then you say that this is one angle. The other angle I would like to take is I would like to look at WhatsApp's mission, right? Because you need an anchor point, right? So that anchor point becomes the mission of the product, right? So I want to relook at WhatsApp. There is another way I can attack this. We'll look at WhatsApp's mission, and then you can talk about, I can think about that mission and come up with 4 or 5 different ideas. Now you tell me whether you want me to go down the monetization path, or you want me to go down that path, right? So let's say he said monetization, and you came up with again 4 ideas, right? Well, the ideas that we discussed, right? So one of the ideas is subscription-led model. WhatsApp does not remain free. You make it paid, or you have some kind of a verified profile mechanism, right? Second thing, I said you could have a business to business offering, right, which you can monetize. Third thing, you can make it e-commerce led, right? You can have a platform within it. Fourth thing, let's say you run ads within it, right? Now for every option you are laying down, right, again you have to list down all the pros and cons, right? So typical pro would be you are making more money, right, which is common to all of these sort of aspects, right? And maybe you can even do some numbers for it. Or you take the other strategy, which is the cons, right? And in the cons, you say that, you know what, if I run ads, here are some of the cons, right? If I put e-commerce within WhatsApp, the pros is I make more money. Second pro is the product starts becoming like a platform, right? So the stickiness even more increases, which is not available when I monetize it via ads, which is not available when I monetize it via profile subscriptions, verified profile subscriptions, which is not available when I purely monetize it with a B2B API, right? So maybe the e-commerce thing becomes the first priority because it has a lot more pros and pretty much no cons, right? And then you do the maths, right? So you maybe just list down all the different pros, right? Which basically uh, not only improve the product offering, it makes the product more strong going long term, right? And so in this case, if I had to kind of sort of prioritize amongst these things, I would say that from first principles, even without doing the numbers, the e-commerce bet looks really, really good because A, we have a lot of data. The same user is on Facebook. B, it not only it basically makes WhatsApp not just a communication platform, but a full-blown platform. It becomes a e-commerce plus communication plus sort of almost like a well-integrated platform in every aspect of the user's life, right? But there is no way then he's going to basically let go of WhatsApp and move to another platform like Telegram, right? If anything, over a period of time, I can basically build an e-commerce behemoth out of it because I know that Flipkart does $15 billion of GMV in India in a year, right? So you already have a number sort of somewhere handy with you, right? So I would automatically go to my interviewer and say, maybe the e-commerce bet is the first bet that I want to take. The second bet I want to take, again, maybe verified profiles, given that, again, logically you argue, right, that given that verified profiles have not taken off pretty much on any platform in India, right, or even globally, the sign-up rates are really, really low. Maybe verified profiles also is at a lower sort of priority, right? Maybe the second bet to do is basically a B2B offering for customers to push messages to their customers, because WhatsApp as a communication platform works really, really well. And it is very, very convenient for customers to interact with brands over WhatsApp. So automatically the second idea, which is the B2B API, again becomes like a priority. Maybe the third idea is doing the verified profiles. And then eventually the fourth idea is maybe at some point of time introduce some kind of ads, though in a very minimally invasive manner, right? So once you come up with ideas, you will notice that automatically there will be a certain stack ranking that will make sense from a user's perspective, right? Which is what I spoke about earlier as well, right? So you talk about it from a user's perspective first, and then you do the numbers, right? First strategy is always look at it from a user's perspective. I think from a user's perspective, the idea that looks the neatest and richest is basically introducing e-commerce within WhatsApp, right? Similarly, if you go to the other bucket, which I talked about, the connecting people and community, right? We don't know, right? But I think the simplest thing that we do today, right? There also you can logically articulate that today also people make a lot of WhatsApp groups to basically come together for a cause, right? There are apartment groups, there are society groups, there are office groups, there are people who are playing together. Maybe they're coming together to play soccer on a weekend, right? So already that behavior is there. So why not piggyback onto that behavior and actually launch a full-blown platform, right? Where the one message does not get sort of drowned in all the constant stream of messages that are coming in a group. If you evolve it into a community plus bulletin board, there are certain messages you can pin, right? There are certain announcements you can make, all right? And that is already piggybacking on user behavior that is seen on the platform today, right? So naturally, that kind of becomes like one of the key considerations and maybe becomes one of the first things that you pick up when you're trying to sequence this, right? So when you apply the user's lens, you will always find that certain ideas will appeal more to you as a user, and you know that it will appeal more to your interviewer also as a user, right? So you pick those items first, right? And then try and apply a mathematical lens to it and see whether that can become a sizable opportunity for the company. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Yeah. Right, guys. Okay, guys, I think that's all I had. I had another case study, but we are way beyond time. Sorry for keeping you guys beyond 6:30, but I hope you found value in the session.
No, Anurag, I think it's great pleasure for all of us to keep learning so much from you and giving so much of your time on a Saturday evening. So thanks a lot, and all of us have enjoyed a lot. Throughout the session, it was really engaging as well. So thanks to you, and thanks to everyone else also who has joined us today. Anurag, any last note to people who are preparing for product management interviews? This will be the last, and then we'll definitely close the session.
I would just say, guys, just work. Like, I personally chose this topic because I see as the biggest pain point, right? I used to struggle myself early on in my career, right? Because I always used to wonder how do I come up with good creative ideas, right? I'm not a creative artist, and for me, creativity was always something that I used to always relate with, like people with. I always used to think about it like it's something that is innate to people, right? Some people are by definition creative. It's not true. It's a process. So just follow this process, and the biggest filter, at least I personally have seen as an interviewer, is the product design question. All I have to do is throw a product design question at the candidate, and I can easily filter out 95 to 98% of the candidates. People are just, even people with 4 years, 5 years of experience, they might be great executionists, they might be great at their current work, but they really struggle to come up with fresh ideas because it's something that you don't really do a whole lot early on in your career, right? You are expected to sort of take ideas from your leadership or senior product folks in your organization, right? And just sort of move on with it, right? So, so this is something that is tested over and over again in an interview setting. So I'd strongly recommend all of you to kind of work on that muscle, because that is the first thing that you need to do. Everything else comes later, right? Most of the people are able to get the analytics questions fine. Most of the people are able to get the guesstimates okay. Even though some people do struggle with the maths, but the guesstimates, the product analytics, the root cause analysis questions, the execution questions are pretty much okay, right? Most of the people are able to get through it because there is a clear structure to it. Where people really struggle are the product strategy questions and the product design questions. And early on in your career, you will get product design questions more often than product strategy, right? So which is why I chose this topic. So just focus a whole lot. And once you do that first question really well, it just uh, sort of creates such a good positive impression for you that even if you kind of stumble on some of the other questions, I think it is mostly all right. Typically, the first question that you get is a product design question.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for that, Anurag. Really helpful. And all right. I think a happy weekend to everyone who is here. And Anurag, thanks again for joining us.
No
Hope to
worries.
see all of you next week as well, next Saturday. And yeah, thank you everyone for
I'll
joining.
share the deck
Uh-huh.
as well. Please feel free to pass it on to all the participants.
Yes, yes, yes. We'll share it on the Discord group, everyone. That's
Yeah.
again free for you to join. So yeah. All
Cool,
right,
guys. Thank you so much for staying back. Pleasure talking to all of you.
everyone.